Braveheart Workshops, inspiring connection. Restore. Dream. Getaway experiences. Love, live, and laugh. With Braveheart Workshops. Live now with Jill Reynolds.
The Connection Show, Restore, Renew, and Reconnecting Community, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today from Utah is Britney Thompson. Welcome to the show, Britney.
Thanks, Jill. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you came on, and I would love the audience to know a little bit about Britney. So I'm going to read her bio to you. Britney Renae Thompson is a dynamic speaker, author, and a Christian certified life coach who shares lessons learned while overcoming her 15-year eating disorder. She helps Christian women move past every type of fear, doubt, and insecurity to live out God's freedom and purpose for their lives. With 10 plus years in full-time Christian ministry, she has her finger on the pulse of women in the 21st century church. She is passionate about helping heal what is broken in the hearts of women. Her message is clear. When we live a God-minded life in this me-minded world, everything changes. Britney is the founder and CEO of Britney Renae Thompson, LLC. Renae Design Company, and the God-Minded. Britney is a dynamic speaker and a certified life coach. She loves helping women break free from destructive thought patterns and empowering them to step into their God calling with a purpose and a passion. So, what an amazing woman of God you are, Britney.
Thank you. It's all glory to him for sure.
Well, definitely. And, just to let the audience know a little bit about that journey that we read about, would you just take us back to maybe your childhood and share how that journey started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the center of Utah in a little tiny town called Ephraim, about 3,000 people when I moved here. And I was a pastor's kid and a missionary kid. So I grew up feeling very alone in my life. Yes, I had brothers and sisters, but just to give you an example, until high school, in high school, I was the only Christian in my high school until my junior year when my sister came into the high school. So I grew up very surrounded by people all the time, but yet feeling very alone. And I guess that is where my story begins and why I'm so passionate about helping women feel like they belong in this world and finding out where where that belonging truly comes from.
So, with that loneliness in your life and only being the only Christian, I'm assuming being from Utah, was there a lot of Mormonism and stuff at your school, and you were the only Christian? Uh,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
okay. So, talk to us a little bit about that loneliness then, and what developed as a result of that? What kind of things happened in your life happened as a result of the loneliness?
So the loneliness really bred in me this need to be loved and accepted by people. I just wanted to be popular. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be beautiful. I wanted to be all of the things that the world tells you need to be in order to be accepted and loved. And what that ended up doing for me is causing me to not love who I was. And I became obsessed with food at a very young age and trying to manipulate my body. Probably from the time I was 12 years old, I started dieting when I was 12 and started realizing that I could really manipulate my body and start looking the way that people thought I should look, or the way that I perceived people thought I should look, I should say. And that really morphed into an eating disorder in my late teenage years, and then a full destructive eating disorder in my early 20s. I was a binge eater starting probably from the age of 22. So,
So younger age, you were restricting and avoiding meals, and then into your 20s, you got into binge eating.
yes. Yeah.
So talk to us about those binge eating days, and what did a day look like for you? What was a day in the life of the binge eater?
That's an interesting. I've never had that question before. I'm glad that you asked it. For me, it was very much about restriction. From the time that I got up in the morning, I was restricting, trying to be healthy, trying to not binge. That was my entire mindset when it got into the really, really bad times of binging. So I would get up in the morning, try not to think about food, try to think about what healthy things I could eat, how I could restrict so that I wouldn't binge later on in the day, which ultimately led me to the place where by the mid afternoon, I couldn't control myself anymore. And it became this really, oh, it was like the monkey on your back. Have you ever heard that statement where it would just, it's there and it's constant and it's constantly just attacking my senses, attacking my mind until I had to give in because I couldn't focus on anything else. And so I would binge from the afternoon, late afternoon until I went to bed at night. Really, that was just continual. They call it like graze binging a lot of the time,
Mhm.
where you would just start binging, start eating something, and then you'd go to the next thing, into the next thing, into the next thing until you'd eaten. For me, it was about 10,000 calories I was binging on when I was binging.
And at that time, were you at college? Were you living at home? Where were you living then?
When it got really bad, I was living on my own. So it started in college, though. My first binging episode was when I was 18 years old in college. And it was very rare that that would happen until about the age of 22 when it started becoming like a weekly thing. It was happening more and more frequently. And when it got to the worst point, I would say I was binging maybe 4 times a week, but 10,000 calories at every single time.
And at that point, you were living by yourself, or did you have roommates?
I was living by myself at that point.
So share a little bit, because when I myself have am recovered from an eating disorder and have gone into treatment, and we used to have to do a lot of writing assignments, and everybody was required to write their typical day of their eating disorder and their worst day of their eating disorder. So explain when I say a typical day. So a typical day would be, like you said, you would restrict in the morning and then you would binge at night. So um, for matters of helping identify for the listener who may struggle, um, can you explain what the binge looked? So when you said you would binge like in the afternoon, what would that look like and what would it cost? That because it costs a lot of money to binge.
Oh, a lot of money. It seriously sucked me dry financially for so many years. So I would not spend a lot of money in the morning, obviously, because I wasn't really eating at that point, or I was trying to eat healthy so that I wouldn't binge later on in the day. Like thinking, if I eat this, then this won't happen. So on those days, I would say those were my regular binge days where I would start off with eggs and toast maybe in the morning. And then for lunch, I would have like a bowl of soup and a side salad. And then once the afternoon came around, I would start getting these overwhelming cravings. And for the most part, it was all the things that I wouldn't allow myself to have any other time.
Like
And
like
so
like
I
like
would
like what kind of food would that be?
like Oreos
Mhm,
and Doritos
mhm.
and ice cream and pizza and all the things that I was told or had believed were just totally unhealthy for you. Um, and that were bad foods because I had classified foods as good foods or bad foods. And so
Mhm.
anytime the binging would happen, it would 99% of the time be the bad foods that I classified.
That your brain was telling you these are bad for you because I've
Yes.
been told these are bad, or they might have too many calories, there's too much sugar or something, so it has to be bad.
Yes. And I would have these thoughts in my head like, well, you know what? I'm going to start my diet on Monday. So I might as well eat this today because I'm not ever going to eat it ever again. you know,
Yeah, and
that
yeah,
that mindset.
yeah, and again, for the audience to know, because I was in treatment, and the one place I went to, they had a whole treatment center just for binge eating. And one of the most renowned psychiatrist doctorate that knows binge eaters says that that's considered deprivation mentality. And when you
Yes.
go into a deprivation mentality of saying things are good or bad, or should not eat, I should do this or should not do this, good or bad, black and white thinking, what happens with deprivation is we get so consumed with deprivation that you have no choice but to binge. So the way they taught us how not to binge was to a couple of things they made us do, Brittany, is have a planned splurge day once a week. And a planned splurge would be, let's say you wanted your Oreo cookies. And let's say the serving on the box of Oreo says 2 cookies is 1 serving. So your planned splurge, you would get 3. So you'd get 1.5 servings instead of 1. So you'd get 3 cookies, for that was your planned splurge. And you'd plan it so that you could look forward to it so you wouldn't feel deprived. The other thing they made us do is write down what either our biggest binge food was or our fear food. So let's say your biggest binge food was pizza, or your fear food was eating pizza. So they made you for 5 days in a row, eat that fear food or that binge food. So if your binge food was pizza for 5 days in a row, but they made it the normal serving, like pizza in a box is maybe 2 slices, and then you have a side salad because you always have an entree plus. So if it's not a whole dinner, so you would do 2 slices of pizza and a salad for 5 days in a row. And that would get you to a place where you got rid of that deprivation, feeling deprived, and say, 5 days in a row is kind of boring eating this pizza. I think I'll try something different. And then the other thing they had us do is we all had to go to an ice cream shop, and we all had to get 2 scoops of ice cream with a topping. And so we all went, and everybody was like panicking. Oh no, I'm here for recovery, and I got to get 2 scoops of ice cream and a topping. So we got that, and we all went outside. And this was in Chicago, and it was a beautiful summer day in July. And we sat outside eating our ice cream. But the therapist didn't tell us what we had to do. Is we had to stop 3/4 of the way and leave the rest, and learn how to have intuitive eating, where you stop and you don't
Yeah,
finish it.
I remember the first time that I ever stopped eating because I was full. And it was not that long ago. It was about 3 years ago. And I remember sitting in a restaurant with a friend, and I'd ordered because my coach that I had hired had taught that restriction is what actually causes binging.
Hmm.
And so she taught, when you go out to eat, order what you want to order, but only eat what you're hungry for. And for me, it was always this show, like I couldn't talk, I couldn't focus on the conversation with people until I'd eaten my food because I was so focused on my food. So I would just shove all of my food down, and then I would be able to have a conversation with people. But I remember sitting at this lunch with my friend and taking a bite here, taking a bite there, and then totally forgetting that there was food on my plate, which I mean, it had been years and years and years when that first happened. But also, to answer your question earlier about the cost of my binging, I would say on average, I think that's amazing because I remember that day so clearly and so vividly, and how freeing it was to say, I can leave food on my plate. It's not wasting it. It's really just being a normal eater. And I felt normal for the first time in my life. But when I was binging, I would go to the grocery store and I would buy all of my binge foods. So one of my biggest binge foods was macaroni and cheese. Because it was cheap, and I could eat a lot of it and not spend a ton of money. Pizza, ice cream, cookies, anything, bread, anything that was I had classified as off limits, I would buy. So I would say on average, I was spending on a binge day $20 to $30 in food
A day, yeah.
a day.
Yeah.
And that was a really big binge. And so I would buy the cheapest things I possibly could so that I could eat the largest amount of food possible. And I remember feeling so just completely out of control in my life. I don't know if you went through that, but just that feeling of I have no control over my life. I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one that's struggling in this way. And I'm so ashamed of the person that I've become. And it just became this overwhelming, it was my punishment. And it was also this like, because I didn't want to eat this food. I didn't want to go and eat an entire large pizza, but I didn't know what else to do or how else to do it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to me personally. And I'm sure many people that are listening, I'm sure can identify. And I think, like I had said, this mentality of deprivation is so imperative because when you put yourself in a deprivation mode, you will binge. You will fail. I mean, it's just like you can't take away. It would be like depriving yourself of love on forever and ever and ever. We're geared towards that, and so I think getting that out of that black and white thinking and getting into the grays of life. And the other one I think is so important. There's a couple of other is the leptin in your brain. Leptin in the brain. It's called leptin resistance. If people want to Google that and read about it, it's when your brain has a hormone, and the purpose of leptin is to tell your mind that you're hungry and full. And it truly is a disease that if you become leptin resistant, you do not know when you're hungry and full. And it takes about 4 to 5 months of consistent, regular eating on a schedule to get the leptin to turn back on. And the schedule they taught us it was called the recovered plan of planned recovery program for recovered eating. And they told us you would have to get up in the morning and 1 hour upon rising, eat your breakfast that should consist of a protein, a carb, and a produce. And then and I had to do this, Brittany. I had to literally count on my fingers. Like if I ate at 7, I had to go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 o'clock, I got to eat again. And so the 11 o'clock, I would have to do another protein and a produce. So it could be like celery and peanut butter. And then count three more hours. So 11, 12, 1, 2. By 2, I had to eat lunch. So again, it depends when you wake up. If you get up at 5, your snack's going to be more like 9, and then lunch. And then lunch should be, again, a protein, a produce, and a carb. So like a sandwich with maybe lettuce and tomato on it. And then count 3 more hours. And then dinner, protein, produce, and carb. And if you went to bed early, you wouldn't need an evening snack. But if you went to bed later, 3 more hours, have a small, again, snack of protein and produce. So you might do a handful of cashews and an apple or something like that. So they said that so that purposefully, so you wouldn't go into deprivation and your cortisol and glucose and insulin levels wouldn't be spiking and they'd stay balanced. So that was something that I learned. The other one that you would love, and I'd love to share this with you and see how you respond. And actually, on my connection show, we did this one night and it was great. I had everyone go get some food and bring it on the connection show. And this guy Jake, you're in your 30s. Jake was one of the therapists in treatment, and he was eye candy. He was so cute, and I'm 66 years old, and I was like, man, this guy is so cute. So one day he said, Jill, you and I are going to do a session at lunch. So we're going to go upstairs and we're going to sit in these chairs, and it was like a big oversized chairs and a couch, and we're going to have some pizza and grapes for lunch. So we go upstairs. And I began eating my pizza and talking to Jake in between bites. And so again, he's really good looking, Brittany, like really good looking. And so I'm eating my pizza and I'm talking, and Jake leans in. He goes, "So Jill, what's the taste of that pizza?" And I went, tastes good. He goes, no, 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 no. What does it taste like? Does it taste bitter? Is it sweet? Is it salty? What's the taste? And I went, it's salty. And so then I'm eating my grapes and talking. He goes, so Jill, what's the temperature of those grapes? I go, the temperature? He goes, yeah. Are they cold? Are they cool? Are they warm? Are they hot? And they're cool. So I'm eating again. And he leans in. He says, so Jill, what's the texture of that pizza? I go, texture? What is texture? And he goes, is it crunchy? Is it crisp? Is it creamy? And it's crunchy. Well, this is going on, Brittany, for like 40 minutes. So when he said this and I'm into the texture, I just all of a sudden said, I can't handle this. And he leans in, he goes, why? What's going on? And I said, I'm feeling aroused. And he goes, you're feeling aroused? I said, yeah, I don't know what is going on. And he laughed and he says, do you know that your salivary glands are that connect with the brain with sexual sensations? And I go, what? He goes, yeah, why do you think the Romans would sit around and they'd eat food and then make love? And he goes, so he goes, when you're connecting your food, and tasting and getting in touch with the taste, texture, and temperature, it's very arousing. And I was like, wow. And he said, so anyway, when you have your next meal, slow it down and stop and say, what's the texture, the temperature, and the taste? Anyway, I thought that was just like an amazing thing because I don't think in my whole life I ever tasted or knew temperature or texture of food. Never. Because I would just pile it in, like you said, and eat it so fast.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize this about people who struggle with binge eating is that it's not about the food. The food is just like the byproduct of our feelings or the things that we can't deal with in our lives. And it's a disease like any other eating disorder where somebody is so obsessed with their body and being accepted and being loved that they don't eat. For me, it was so much about just dealing with my feeling, actually not having to deal with my feelings, to not have to struggle with the things that I was struggling with. It was just a comfort. It was like something to cover up the pain I was feeling. And food was just something to take up the time, to dull the pain, to cause. And it's interesting because as you were describing, like the taste, touch, feel, the temperature of food, I don't think that I ever really noticed those things about food. And I used to tell people this very often when you're talking about leptin and the way that it creates the hunger and fullness signals in our body. I used to tell people my body doesn't have a trigger to tell me that I'm full. It just doesn't have that. I'm never full and I'm never hungry either necessarily. And so as I was learning about the brain and the scientific reasoning behind why the program that I was doing was actually working, I learned very much about that process of hunger and fullness and being satiated by the food that you're eating, because I was never satisfied. It was always this process of, okay, so I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to buy food, I'm going to eat all the food, then I'm going to feel sick for the rest of the night because that's just what happens, and I won't be able to do anything, and I'll probably fall asleep because I have totally just overloaded my body, and I knew that, and I knew that would happen, and I hated that feeling, and I hated the process, and yet I was doing it 4 times a week at some point.
Well, I'd be curious to know if you've investigated this, Brittany, as you're talking, is you had mentioned as a child you felt so alone, so alone. And so living alone is when your binge eating started in really heavily. You were 22 living alone. And so here you are alone. And food becomes a friend. And so when you're all alone and you have this routine, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to see the people at the grocery store that maybe I know, maybe I don't know, and get in the car and I'm going to come home with my favorite friend, macaroni and cheese, Oreos, and pizza. And when I eat them, I will not feel so alone. And so it fills that void of whatever it is, that pain within of of loneliness. And so did you experience that when you had those friends with you? I remember I ask you this because my mother's deceased and she moved to Vegas. And almost several times a week, she would go to the casinos and play the slots. And then when I would go to Vegas to visit her, she literally would say, "You got to come to the casinos with me." And we'd go and she'd walk through the casino and she'd say, "That slot machine is where I won $10. That slot machine was where I won 20." And those slot machines were her friends
Yeah.
because that's where she had won her money and it became so much her disease and addiction. So I would assume this feeling that you got overcame you of I'm going to pick these items up and I'm going to bring them home and I won't be alone.
I mean, yes, I would say that I don't think that it crossed my mind at the time. Um, I didn't think of food that way, but I used to tell people food was my best. I loved the way that I would feel as I was eating food because it was a comfort. But I hated the fact that I couldn't stop myself from eating. And I hated the way that I felt afterwards. And I hated the way that I felt for days after that. And I hated the way, I mean, I just hated everything about myself at that point in my life. And food, although I knew food was causing a lot of the issues that I was having and the emotions that I was feeling. I know it's not about the food, but at the time, that is what was causing all of this anxiety and this depression and this panic in my life because I was getting farther and farther and farther away from the person that I wanted to be.
Mhm.
Um, and I was becoming the person that I had tried so hard not to be. Um, and that was just, I couldn't deal with it. And food was the way that I dealt with it.
Mhm.
Um, but it was amazing when I finally learned what it meant to feel and what it truly meant to actually like myself for who I am and what I meant. I told somebody this. Well, I told my coach this when I first started a program. Um, that I didn't know who I would be without my eating disorder. I didn't know if I would like myself. I didn't know if I would be fun or if I would be just this really boring person or if I would be a totally different person that I didn't like. I was worried. That was one of my biggest fears that I wouldn't know who I was without food or without my eating disorder.
Mhm.
And I think that so often that's the feeling that people that have an eating disorder or any type of addiction have is like, this has become my constant companion. What will I do without it?
Mhm.
Who will I be without it? Who will I become on the other side of my eating disorder? And I just want to throw this out there right now for anybody that's listening that does have an eating disorder. You will be better. You won't have to worry about, I mean, not having an eating disorder has allowed me to step into the person that I know God created me to be. I couldn't
Mhm.
have done that with my eating disorder because I wasn't able to deal with the things that were happening in my life. But even though it was a difficult and emotional process, the person that I am now is a totally different person. And I like myself so much better. Like it's not, there's no question you will be
Yeah.
better on the other side.
And so talk to us a little bit about how then and it's an ongoing process. It's nothing that you just wake up tomorrow morning and okay, I love my body. So how did you have to deal then and begin to embrace your body image?
Oh, that's a great question. My coach, so I don't know if you know my story at all, but as I was sitting one night in my living room, I was calling out to God. I'm a believer and I care very deeply about the Lord and the Bible and my brothers and sisters around me. I care all about those things a lot. And I was calling out to God one night because I was just feeling so lost, so without purpose. And I just didn't want to have this anymore. It was in the process of stuffing a large pizza into my mouth. And I just remember feeling so overwhelmed with desperation. I was desperate for something. And God gave me the answer to what I was looking for, which was an amazing woman who taught me. She claimed that she could help anyone overcome an eating disorder using only their brain. And she did. Within the first week of starting that program, I had stopped binging. And I still was having those thoughts, those continual thoughts happening, but I had learned how to control those. And about halfway through the program, I was really, really struggling as a believer, because she was teaching me things that I didn't personally believe. And yet they were helping me overcome my eating disorder. And so I started comparing the things that she was teaching me with what God's word says about our minds and our hearts. And she taught me how to overcome those thoughts by saying them out loud and by following this process. And I finally got to the place where I could do that. And it was a very natural process. But really what it came down to, that recovery, that current, I still find myself sometimes going back into those thought processes. But the difference is that I don't act on those thoughts anymore. So I've learned what it means to truly renew my mind as taught in the Bible. And I teach people that process because it's what truly gave me the freedom that I was desiring in my life, to say, okay, even though I'm having that thought right now, it's lying to me. It's not true. What is true? How do I step into that? So I teach people a 4-step process that I would love to share with your listeners if you're up for it.
Yeah, share it with us, definitely. But
Yeah.
you
So
got
the
but you have to save some of it because the listeners have to come to Branson because you're going to be a speaker there, and we don't want to give all your secrets away, so they'll come.
it's not all my secrets, and it's a process. I will tell you, even though it seems very simple, what I'm sharing with you today, it does take a lot of support and guidance. And I mean, it's simple, but it's also very complicated because it's dealing with our minds and our habits and our thoughts. And anytime you're dealing with a constant companion, a constant habit that we've had in our lives, it takes a lot to overcome that, So the 4-step process that I teach people it's the 4 S's is what I call it. The first is you need to see your thoughts. So you need to be aware that there are thoughts in your head that shouldn't be there. You just have to be aware that they're there. Then to say your thoughts. And this is a process of saying them out loud, because what that does is it wakes up the prefrontal cortex of your brain and allows you to see your thoughts logically. So through a logical lens, so that you can make a logical decision about what you're actually wanting to do. And then the third is to speak truth. So whatever thought you're having, if it's a lie, if it's something that's trying to convince you to do something that you don't want to do, you need to speak truth over that. And then the last thing is to set your mind on that truth. So you set your mind on the truth of, for me, here's an example. I need to go to the fridge and see what's in there. Right? A very simple thought, but the reasoning behind it is, well, maybe I'm bored, or maybe I'm feeling lonely, or maybe I'm feeling unloved. And so when you say your thoughts out loud, I need to go look in the fridge right now. Okay, why? Just have a conversation with yourself. Why? Have a conversation out loud with yourself. Well, I'm not hungry right now. I'm just kind of feeling a little off. Okay, why are you feeling off? Well, there's something that I need to get done that I don't want to do right now. So it's procrastination. Okay, so speaking truth over those thoughts and then allowing yourself to say, okay, the truth is that I really don't want to go to the fridge. I really don't want to see what's in there because I need to get some stuff done right now. And then
Mm.
set your mind to do what you actually want to do, which is what we should be doing in the first place, is being in control of our thoughts. The Bible talks about that very, very clearly.
Well,
And so
I love that idea. I think the only wording for me that, and again, and you shared it so magnificently for the audience to hear, is again, I think for me, for myself, I've had to very cautiously and consciously get out of the words should and shouldn't, should think this way, shouldn't think this way. So instead, I utilize a little bit of a different principality, but very similar, almost identical to what you're doing. And it's called internal family systems. And it was created by Dick Schwartz, who is a renowned therapist. And he actually was in one of the primary therapists at Castlewood Treatment Center in St. Louis. And as he was working with the eating disordered population, he noticed by traditional cognitive therapy, they were getting sicker instead of better. And he was very frustrated. He goes, no matter what we're doing, they're getting worse. Why are they getting worse? And so he noticed that as he spoke to the patients, they would say stuff like, this part of me feels like I need to procrastinate. Like my procrastination part, I'm procrastinating because, and this part of me feels so much shame, or this part of me feels so lonely. So he noticed that. So he said, what would it be like if you slowed it down, closed your eyes, and went and had a conversation with procrastination and said, like, procrastination, would you be willing? And he uses the C's. He's got curiosity, compassion, clarity, creativity, connection. He uses the C words. So what would it be like, procrastination, if I sat with you and I'm closed my eyes and asked if you would be willing to connect with me and tell me why you're there? Or I would, could you creatively come and tell me where you came from? And so slowing it down and giving that part permission to give you dialogue and tell you story, connect the dots, it may take you back to a time in your life where maybe you procrastinated and that helped you feel better or whatever. So it'll share story with you. And as you do the story with the parts, then what he started to do is he tell, like you said, the thoughts could be lies. He started to do and tell the part to get away, to that it was bad. Well, as he did this, the clients got worse, and he was like, "Wow, what's going on?" So then he thought, oh, I'm going to slow it down and connect with the parts, but instead of me telling the parts to go away or that they're bad, why don't I thank the part for coming into my being and ask it, get curious and ask it if it's willing to unblend and take a break. Because a lot of these parts, Brittany, have come into play. A good analogy as Christians is God creates us in our mother's beautiful womb. And as that baby's formed in that beautiful womb, that baby may have been wanted. And so in the womb, it feels loved, it feels joy and connection. Or you have this child who wasn't wanted in the womb. And so it's growing and it feels unwanted and unloved. So this part comes in. Now the baby comes through the birth canal, and as the doctor pulls it through, it spanks it, and the baby all of a sudden feels angry or sad or scared. And then they cut the umbilical cord, and the baby feels abandoned. Now, are these parts lies? No. Are these parts bad? No. But they're parts that come in. And so to discover where they come from out of curiosity, then you could say to the part, would you be willing to go, and mine is the beach. Would you be willing to go to the beach and relax and chill? And I give it sand pails because I love playing in the sand. And then, should you have a day where you feel like, I just want to procrastinate, you may go to the beach and say, hey, procrastination, can you come back and sit with me today? Because I just don't feel like doing anything. Now, is it a bad part? No. You just may come back and ask it for help. And then you can say, okay, I'm done. 20 minutes I procrastinated. Now go back to the beach because I have to get my life in order. So I hear what you're saying. And then he did this, and everyone started to recover. And so now this modality of therapy is in the DSM medical books is one of the best modalities of therapy to get rid of anxiety, depressive disorders, and PTSD.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing stuff. And I'm telling you, Brittany, when I did this type of work, it was the first time in my life by unburdening the parts that I felt centered and close to God. It was like because I unburdened all this stuff that was blocking me from my relationship with God.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what really what it comes down to is what things have we given extra power to in our lives that shouldn't have power. Yes, they're a part of our lives. Procrastination is a part of every person's life. It's a part of the person who gets the most amount of things done in this world. Procrastination is still a part of their life, but yet they don't give any power to it.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things that I do teach my clients is there are certain words to look for when you are searching through your thoughts, when you are dealing with the thought habits that you've created in your life. There's certain words to look for. I should do that, or I shouldn't do that, or I feel this way, or like those feeling thoughts, those emotion thoughts, those things that become our identity. Those are the things that you need to deal with, because the I always like to give the example of a bed, as we're digging through our thoughts, that there's some thoughts that come into our life that are just throw pillow thoughts. They're just there. They don't really have a lot of purpose. They just get you to the logical conclusion faster, right? So you take those throw pillow thoughts, and then you have the comforter thought, which is like that warm and cozy thought that, like, well, food makes me feel better. For me, that's what it was. Food is my friend. Food makes me feel loved or comforted. And then you take those thoughts away, and you get down to the protective layers, the sheet layers. Well, I'm not good enough the way I am, so food makes me feel better. And then you finally get down to the identity piece, which is the mattress part of our thought lives. And it's really this like peeling back the layers until you find the real reason why, for me, why I'm eating 10,000 calories worth of food right now, right?
Mhm.
The mattress layer is this layer of, well, this is who I am. I am unlovable. Food makes me feel loved. Food makes me feel comforted. So therefore, I should go look in the fridge. And you look
Mhm.
at it in a backwards. I'm unlovable. I'm feeling right now like I'm never going to be what I want to be. So therefore,
Mhm.
and it's coming down to that identity
Yeah,
issue
you got to
of,
break it. You got to keep getting down to that core.
yes,
And that's what Dick calls them. He says the first layer are called the protectors or managers. The second layer, that he calls them the firefighters that try to manage the
yeah,
protectors.
the
And
protectors.
yeah, and then the next level he calls the exiled parts, the ones that are exiled. And
Yeah,
we even don't even know they're there, like you said, the unlovable. Once you're unburdening these three layers, then all you're left with is self, and self was created by God.
exactly. And your
Self.
your identity is found in what God says about you, not what you believe about yourself.
Hmm.
And so that's what I teach my clients on a daily basis, that, what? Who your identity is so much more than what you think your identity is.
Yeah.
Because we've been taught to believe that who we are is just who we are,
Hmm.
but the truth is that we've been conditioned to believe those things about ourselves. And so finding that God-mindedness, that God-minded identity is what we're really looking for.
Yeah, and just for the audience too, one, and if you haven't seen it in a while, it's worth to rent it again from what we're talking about, is to rent the Netflix video, Inside Out, the Pixar animated film. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Yes. So that
It
was,
so perfectly captured what goes on in our brains.
well, and that's actually the person who wrote that did internal family systems therapy, because it's exactly that. The little girl Joy, she stuffs her emotions and stuffs her sadness for moving, and then her anger comes out, and then her despair, and so she cannot return back to her true essence of self until she allows sadness to have a place in her life. And as soon as she says to sadness, "You can come in," then sadness unblends, leaves, and her joy returns. And so it definitely is a great movie to really look at those parts of yourselves. So talk to us a little bit more about now how God healed you, and he's been on this journey of healing, and how now he's directing you into your new journey of your companies, your design company, and your coaching. And so tell us a little bit about, in the ending here, about your business and what you have in store for everyone in Branson in February.
Yeah, this is the part that I'm most excited about because this has been my dream from the time I was 12 years old. I knew from the time I was 12 years old that I was supposed to be a speaker and author and to help women get freedom in their lives. But of course, I didn't know how to do that at 12 years old. Uh, and through my story, through the fierce faithfulness of God in my life, I've come to this point where I'm ready to, now that I'm healed, now that I'm in this process of actually loving myself, actually being the person that God created me to be. He's like, okay, now let's go do it. Let's get out there and let's do what I've called you to do. And so I am like I said, I'm a professional speaker. I am a published author. I wrote a book called God Minded, Living God Focused in a Me Focused World. And I'm also a Christian mindfulness coach. So I teach biblical mindfulness and what that truly means. And it's not anything like you would think compared to the world's idea of mindfulness, which is it's just really interesting because that's really how I got freedom in my life, was through learning what biblical mindfulness really is and how to renew my mind and how to live in purpose and in passion. And so that's what I teach people now. I'm also a designer. It's what I went to school for. So I design book covers and flyers and logos, and I do full branding for companies as well, which I really love. I love the creative aspect of it. And I'm really, really looking forward to going to Branson and being a part of this conference and being able to share my story in light of God's fierce faithfulness, which is really what the whole conference is about.
Well, that's amazing. So, what I'd love now is to let the audience see your bio here. We are going to be, Brittany and I, and 12 others will be in Branson, Missouri, February 5th through 7th. And tickets are on sale now. So please go to my website, which is braveheartworkshops.com, so you can learn more about the conference and then come to Branson and connect with Brittany and some of these other amazing speakers that we're going to have there. And it will be just so energizing and so uplifting. And it really helps you to identify your own story because your own story is so important to God and to others and to share. So, Brittany, I'm just so grateful to get to know you, and I really look forward to February coming and us connecting even further.
I do as well. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Well, thanks so much for joining the Connection Show. And everybody, join us too on Wednesday nights, where we also have the Connection Gathering Tribe. And sometimes leaders, just like Brittany, will jump on those shows on Wednesday nights. So you never know who's going to be on. So join us on Wednesday night. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye, Brittany.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on The Connection Show. Let's connect now. We can dream together to renew, restore, and reconnect with wellness in our life and community. To enhance connection, join us in the Zoom Connection Gathering Tribe on Wednesday evenings. The Zoom Connection Gathering Tribe is an easy and practical way for everyone to meet up, gather, and feel welcomed and accepted. To join us, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Then click on the podcast tab and the Zoom Connection Tribe tab. On that page, go to the Facebook page called the Connection Show Gathering Tribe and register to join our Facebook group. We post secure passwords each week in the group so you can log in safely. We meet on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for 1.5 hours with great topics, laughter, and connection. See you on Wednesday evenings. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.